Hey there. We're going to continue covering these assessments. We're in week 6 of Thrive, and I'm looking at the sexual immorality and the guilt and shame assessment. And so, assessments. I would say that when you're into this territory of listening to assessments with sexual immorality or guilt and shame, I would include abuse from last week in what I'm about to say. It's This is a very tender time for both your mentee. It's also a vulnerable time for you. It's an important thing that it's very important that you're praying for protection for yourself as you hear what's being confessed. You could hear things that might trigger you, that might leave you disturbed, or might tempt you. You might hear things that maybe you've struggled with or you've fantasized about or whatever it might be. And I would just say pray for your heart, that you be ready, and it would be in the light, that there would be a sense of God's presence and that He's the one actively at work here, not a burden being shared by your mentee that's just being placed on you, or a temptation that's being placed on you. And I don't know how, if I hope I can emphasize this adequately. We at Soul Care want to be there for you. I mean, if you are disturbed, or if you feel polluted by what you're hearing and it's following you around, reach out to us. I mean, we'll pray for you. It's normal. It's happened to me when I've been mentoring someone. I just heard stuff that stuck with me in a way that it's like, this isn't healthy. It's not good for me, and I'd have to go and just talk to someone about it. I might expose things in your own heart, and that's perfectly okay. What's not okay is to keep it to yourself and try to wrestle with it, or nurse it, or something else. That's even worse. I want to emphasize, we want to minister to you as you are ministering to your mentee. So reach out to us, pray for your own heart, and then I'd also say pray for your posture and your nonverbal communication and the way you receive and listen to the vulnerable things that are being confessed in these assessments. Because if you look surprised or put off or disgusted or something as someone is sharing something, that can really damage them. Uh, they're taking a risk in sharing this stuff, and you'd never want to shame someone when they're confessing sin. You certainly don't want to shame them or make them feel condemned when they already feel a sense of shame. And I can tell you that that Jesus Christ, never left people feeling condemned when they came out with their sin. I'm thinking of John chapter 8, where the woman's caught in adultery. Who's here to condemn you? Well, neither do I condemn you. Romans 8:1, there's now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. There is a pattern that you see in the scriptures, and the Gospels in particular. Jesus tends to give law to the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. What I mean by He gives law to the proud is, if you think you're doing good and if you think you're good enough, the law of God often gets lifted up, where you've heard it said, do not commit adultery. Well, if you even look at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart. It takes the law, the standard that people think they know, and it's like, I've never committed adultery. Well, if that's a proud thought, He lifts it up higher to show, well, this is the heart of the law. He does that. It happens throughout the scriptures. On the other end, when someone confesses their sin, or when someone humbly recognizes, this is wrong in my life, this is eating me alive, God doesn't give more law. He doesn't condemn. He gives grace to the humble. And so you are a minister giving grace and being gentle in the way you receive this person's confessions, even if what they share surprises you internally. So be aware of your posture, your facial expressions. Pray that you come across as loving and receptive and empathetic, and pray that you are genuinely empathetic. Another good set of verses is Romans 12:9 through the rest, verse 9 and on. It showed a lot of picture how to love sincerely and how to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And prayed through those kinds of passages to get ready. Something else to keep in mind, the things that come up in abuse, the things that come up in sexual immorality, and they will likely show up in other assessments. What shows up in sexual immorality will likely show up in the guilt and shame assessment, or what showed up in anger or in abuse might show up in the fear and anxiety assessment. That's just maybe something happened with sexual immorality is confessed, that might come up again in the grief and loss, because maybe the mistake someone made caused them to lose a relationship that was precious to them. So that's something to bear in mind. There might be some repetition, approaching the same confession from different angles. What else is there? I think that's all I want to share. Well, almost. Keep in mind, if you haven't been using these little categories, lies and vows, and areas that need healing, sinful patterns, character defects, faithful action, just know that do your best to take notes in those areas. I'm looking at page 57, for example. Lies, are they believing that God doesn't love them? Or if I can quit porn, then this would work out for me. Pay attention to lies like that. Areas that need healing, there might be relationships that have been broken or hurt. Maybe there's self-esteem, like self-esteem is not the word I'm looking for, but just identity issues that come out of this. Sinful patterns, character defects. If you haven't noticed, page 108 in your mentor guide has a great list of character defects, just to kind of read through and keep in mind. And then faithful action needed. Do they need to confess something? Do they need to make amends? Do they need to confront someone biblically? Weeks 9, 10, 11, and 12 really walk through those things. But we also are going to be offering something called action plans that come up, and that's also going to help you. But when you write these things down in these areas, it's going to be really helpful later when you come back and refer to the areas that they need to address, what they need to do. For example, if they share something that in sexual immorality, maybe it's going to come up in guilt and shame. You want to make sure that they're dealing with stuff and all the angles necessary. I hope that makes sense. If they feel shame over abuse that's happened to them, well, when they brought it up in abuse, and that you can tell there's a lot of shame around that, you want to make sure that they bring it up again when they talk about shame, that they don't just leave it there at abuse. Let them reapproach it and think about it again. That would be a faithful action item that's needed. I hope all that made sense. But thanks for listening. All right.